Welcome back, guys. More Zendikar Rising spoilers. Good news, I should be hearing about my allocation today from my main distributor to see how much we're going to be getting. These box toppers have people very excited about this set, so set boosters will be allocated, as will draft boosters, as will everything. So everything Zendikar Rising is going to be allocated, at least at launch, and we'll see how that plays out for the rest of the year, but it's a very exciting set. And starting out here with a card, we don't really know what the name's going to be, but it's a 2 casting cost 2/2 that makes the first spell you play with Kicker each turn cost 1 less, and whenever you play a spell with Kicker, he gets a +1/+1, going to be totally reasonable for limited there. Paired Tactician. A lot of cards care about having other cards of similar creature types here, so we've got Human Warrior when it attacks, and at least one other warrior attack, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This can get out of hand pretty fast. If you can get away with an attack on turn 4 and have this thing stick around, it's going to be very, very difficult to take down in combat once it starts getting larger and larger. So this type of card can be very dangerous and limited. A Rock Slide Sorcerer, 4 casting costs 3/3. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery or wizard, he does 1 damage to any target. I expect this card to be incredibly good in limited. In the hierarchy of draft picks or power level from limited, the best thing that you can be doing in general is creature removal, and then after that it's going to be creatures. Within the hierarchy of creatures, the best creatures are creatures that kill other creatures, especially when it is repeatable. So in my mind, a card like Viscera from Onslaught was just one of the absolute best Magic cards of all time for limited, because it was a creature that could kill other creatures, and then on top of it, it had evasion, which this card doesn't, which is why I'm not freaking out about it or anything. If this was a 3/3 flyer, I mean, I would just be totally over the moon about this card, but evasion, of course, making it better, and then, you know, the size of the body relative to the mana cost. So in my mind, she's one of the best draft/sealed cards of all time, best limited cards, and this guy is going to be very good. Not in the conversation for greatest of all time by any stretch. That's reserved for things like Umezawa's Jite and Viscera, things that can mow down legions of opposing foes more easily than this guy can. Nimia Skitter Sneak. As long as an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, he gets +1 and Menace. So you Christmas Land, you got a 4/4. That 8 cards is going to be a tough ask in Constructed, and in Limited, that's a pretty long game. And even if it's a long game, you may not have 8 cards in your graveyard, especially if you've got any way of recurring or using them. We'll see if there's anything in the set. My gut says things are mostly going to stay dead, but we have seen a little bit in terms of recursion. Malakir Blood Priest. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X. You gain X, where X is your party. So a 2/1 for 2, that's going to do a 1-point drain, worst case scenario. Unless, of course, it dies in response to its trigger. But, you know, draining 4 for this would be absolutely phenomenal. So this could be a very good aggressive pick. And I think this one will probably be rated pretty highly as far as draft goes. I wasn't sure I was actually going to have these in this video. So I mentioned earlier the box toppers. That's what people are really amped up about with this set. So we have Fetchlands, both enemy and original, along with a bunch of other highly demanded cards now as box toppers for this set. So Ikoria had, you know, the Godzilla box toppers. People liked them. Double Masters, people went crazy. Now, in a standard booster set, you may be getting a Fetchland just for free, just on top of buying the box, just straight up value. Really incredibly exciting. We have new treatments for all of these, and Flooded Strand, Polluted Delta, the original fetches here. The colors very vibrant, as you see the left side of the card with the red into the green meeting in the middle. And then we do have the enemy as well. So you could be buying a booster box and just straight up getting these special alt art expedition style Scalding Tarns. Pretty busted. Also non-foil, which is, I think, what players would rather have, to be honest. I think most players who are chasing down Fetchlands probably would rather have non-foil. Tournament players in general at this point are not happy with the From the Vault series. You know, that went away. They're not over the moon about really any of the foils. And, you know, if you had to pick, I mean, it's collectors for sure love foil. A lot of casual players love foil, which makes the VIP packs kind of an interesting product for that reason. Morphic Pool enters tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents, so these are also going to be in there. Those are very in demand for Commander players. Prismatic Vista. When the dust settles, this may end up being the best fetch land, and a really visually interesting Wasteland as well. We've heard other cards, I believe Ancient Tomb and Strip Mine are going to be in there, so 30 in total is what I'm hearing. And it's going to be very exciting. I mean, these products are going to be allocated. I should be getting the... I can't take orders until I know my allocation. I mean, it's almost certainly going to sell out. But as soon as I know the numbers, I will get that on my site. And you guys can support the store by supporting the store, just buying product from us, which is always appreciated. Food Chain is an example of the type of card that you can potentially get in this kind of throwback slot that they were talking about, along with Simian Spirit Guide. That's going to be spoiled as time goes on here. Back to the standard set of Zendikar Rises, we've got Fearless Fledgling, a 2 casting cost 1/1 with landfall. When it enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Fearless Fledgling. It gains flying until end of turn. This art reminds me of a very emotional YouTube video from a long time ago called Kiwi. I'll put the link in the description. It's a really beautifully done piece of animation, and that's what this reminds me of. And if you do watch that, let me know what your takeaway from that video is. I think it resonates differently with lots of different people. Kabira Takedown. For 2 mana, going to deal damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature or planeswalker, or it could come into play tapped as a white producing land. Kazul's Fury also has the option of being a tapped land. For 3 mana, it is a fling to any target. This is just classic fling for 1 more mana, and you know, these are going to be difficult for people to really understand how good they are. The ability to not get land screwed is pretty substantial. Like, coming into play tapped can also be a disaster, but given that a lot of the cards in this set are slightly overcosted, it may not be as punishing as previous sets where mana efficiency can just end games super quickly. Kind of the more inefficient the cards are, the less of an issue for things to be coming into play tapped, at least from my estimation. That may prove to be wrong. We've got a 4 mana card here that's going to cost 1 less if your opponent has... no, I can't tell actually. Costs 1 less for something. And this is going to destroy a creature. Let me get the rest of this for you. So if they control a non-basic land, I didn't see any numbers there. I was thinking it was one of the 8 cards in the graveyard situations. But if they have a non-basic land, if they have no basic lands, then it costs 1 less, and you can destroy a creature. So for 4 or 3, either way is probably going to be totally fine. Marasa Brute, 3/3 warrior for 3. Not too much to see here. Alright, just helped out a commander player there, adding mana rocks for the first time to their deck, so had a whole bunch of them to pull for them. I'm not sure if I said anything about this guy yet. He's a 4/4 for 5 with a quasi-creature destruction ability here. Tapping an opponent's creature, if it ends the game, is pretty similar to creature removal. I mean, it does remove it from combat for that turn, and this type of effect can actually be pretty disruptive, so I think this is going to be very, very good and limited. Kazul's Fury, we already did. Cragplate Baloth. It's like a reverse Urza's Rage here. So on Urza's Rage, up front you paid 3. The kicker was more than this. But still, you had to do a pretty big kicker. And for Cragclate Behemoth here, you can pay 7 for a 6/6 that can't be countered with Hexproof and Haste. But if it was kicked, it's a 10/10. So pretty good. Not going to be a ton of situations where it's worth waiting to get a bigger creature. I mean, the 3 extra swings that you're going to get out of this guy before you are able to actually kick him probably makes it worth it to just cast as a 6/6 and smash face. The Hexproof means it's going to be pretty difficult for things to go sideways unless it's some type of pump effect on the other side. So this guy, at 7 mana, nothing to scoff at. It's a little more expensive than perhaps you want it to be for limited. If it had Trample, being able to guarantee pushing through some damage in more situations would be certainly much stronger. But, this card seems fine. Shatter Skull Smashing. That is going to be a difficult one to say 5 times fast. For X and red, you deal X damage divided as you choose among up to 2 creatures and or planeswalkers. And if X is 6 or more, it actually does twice as much. That, and it's a mythic, meaning that it can come into play as a land that taps for red, not tapped if you pay the 3 life. So these mythics, very, very interesting cards. Paying 3 life, is certainly a drawback. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, that is really a interesting design space. The ability to be either a land or be able to just play a powerful removal spell. That card is going to be very high on my list for limited removal. Inscription of Ruin at a 3 casting cost card. We're seeing a bunch of these where you choose one, but if you've kicked it, you get to choose any number instead. So this is either a 3 or 7 mana spell with the modes of an opponent discarding 2 cards, returning a creature card with a converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, or destroying a creature with converted mana cost 3 or less. And I think this card's going to be fantastic and limited, killing opposing creatures. Returning a card is probably amongst the less attractive things you can do here. Wiping out the last 2 cards in your opponent's hand can often be a blowout, but sometimes they're hellbent. So having the optionality makes this, I think, a very, very good limited card. And of course, if you're kicking it, that's all sorts of bloodshed. Royal Eruption. This card feels like an interesting control card for me. I'm not sure that constructed decks would necessarily turn their nose up at this. The 3 damage to any target for 2 at sorcery speed, a little bit of a drawback. You generally want your creature removal to be instant speed. That is not to be dismissed, but being able to kick this later in the game to actually get a player out of there, just 7 damage to the face, this could be kind of interesting. I think it might pair fine with something like a Teferi, Baby Teferi in... I guess we won't have them at the same time because this is rotating out. If this wasn't standard with Baby Teferi, I wouldn't be surprised if this saw some play. Just doming people for 5 damage adds up a lot faster than 3. Attended Healer, forecasting cost 2/3, pushing that cat and dog theme. Got Rescue Cats. Cats don't care about you. They'll leave you to die out there. This is clearly some political posturing from Wizards of the Coast with their pro-cat agenda. I mean, every single cat that's big enough to eat you will eat you. Lions, tigers, mountain lions, they're not even necessarily big enough to eat you. They'll still try. So, whatever. Rescue cats. It's nonsense. Pay 2 and a white. Another cleric you control gains lifelink until end of turn. And then the first time you gain life each turn, you get a 1/1 white cat creature token. So this is going to create some value, and yeah, it's fine. I mean, the fact that it can't give itself lifelink, I'm not sure why they handcuffed the card. It doesn't feel like it would have been at all pushed if you had to sink 3 mana into this thing. But I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it would have created too much advantage too easily. Mana sinks are really important in limited, so being able to sprinkle about some life link dust to all of your other clerics is definitely welcome in turns where you don't actually have a card to play from your hand. Getting full use of your mana anyways is massively advantageous. Expedition Champion gets +2/+0 as long as you control another warrior. 3 mana 4/3s are definitely strong for limited. That is a lot of power for the mana cost, and depending on how many cards at the 2 slot trade up, and we'll see. We've already seen some 3/1s, I believe, but really depending if it's kind of more of a 2 power norm at the 2 mana slot, this card could be very, very solid and limited. Merfolk Falconer, flying 4/4 for 5. When you cast a kicked spell, scry 2. Love it. Absolutely love it for limited. 4/4 flyer for 5. Very dangerous, capable of handling the game all by itself. And, you know, if the board ties up on the ground, this guy is going to close things out super fast. And the fact that you get extra value out of your kicked spells is just all upside for this. Thieving Skydiver, 2 casting cost, 2/1 with flying. Definitely going to be very good in limited. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, gain control of target artifact with converted mana cost X or less. And if that artifact is an equipment, attach it to Thieving Skydiver. That is a very, very good limited card. And I wouldn't be surprised if this sees some play in Constructed Commander for kind of a more casual table. Just really fun. The idea of stealing your opponent's equipment. If you know in your play group somebody's rocking some equipment that you want to steal, a Loxodon Warhammer or something along those lines, this could be a really fun answer to it. If you're sitting there jealous about the equipment shenanigans people are pulling off on your table, what better way to remedy that than using it yourself? Disenchant. What can you say about this card? It's been around since Alpha. It's still playable in Vintage. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible to me that 1 in a white to destroy target artifact or enchantment, they have not done anything that is strictly better than this in white. It's crazy. We've got Ancient Grudge for destroy artifacts. We've got Ray of Revelation. We have all sorts of things that's better at handling just artifacts or just enchantments. But if you're playing white and you need to destroy an artifact or enchantment, you're on some type of blue-white deck, this still sees play in Vintage, which blows my mind that they haven't obsoleted it yet. When I saw the text artifact or enchantment, I was curious if they somehow done something that could compete with Disenchant, and there I saw it's actually just Disenchant. Back again with some new Nahiri, looks like Nahiri art. Spare supplies, 2 casting cost equipment. We haven't seen a ton of equipment yet. There's probably going to be a lot more, and this stuff is very important for limited. The reusability of it, turning your lower drops into more efficient or more powerful creatures, is really a massive change from the early days of Magic. Traditionally, playing enchantments was a disaster. You'd go to play your enchantment on your creature, and then your opponent would kill the creature, and then they'd explain to you that you're bad at Magic, but don't worry, someday you'll get good. And equipment really mitigates that. I was surprised to see the new, what are they calling it, Arena Starter Kit. I actually just played a little bit with my nephew, James, and I am not going to lie, when I was playing the black deck, I had the -4/-4 response for every single one of his pump spells or Colossification. That's a nice way to make a 12-year-old feel good about Magic. Taps out to play +20/+20 on his creature, and I kill it in response, and then I have to remind him that he doesn't get to pick another creature. It's literally just a 2-for-1, and I only invested 2 mana. I mean, that's absolutely brutal, and that's the type of feel bads that equipment is meant to address. You can throw that out there and get advantage. Even if they counter the equip, you're down the mana, you're not down the card. Ultimately, card advantage is just too much to overcome. I mean, it's a card game. Cards are pretty good. So this guy enters the battlefield tapped, enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and you can pay 2, tap it, sack it to draw a card. So this thing is not an equipment. I saw the art, went on an equipment rant. That's hilarious. We do these in one take, guys. There's not going to be any fixing that. So this seems fine, drawing a card and then paying 2 to cash out and get another card. I don't see a lot of constructed play as far as this goes. There's already like Ichor Wellspring or something. There's artifacts that you can play to draw a card, and then when it gets sacrificed, you draw a card, or when it goes to the graveyard, and you just play that with some sack outlets. No reason to be paying 2 mana for this effect. Not embarrassing for limited at all. Being able to slot this in roughly around your other plays. At 1 mana, it would be so much stronger. For example, if this costs 1 mana and then 3 to activate, I would be way more on board. But this is not going to be an embarrassing, 23rd non-land card in your deck. Cunning Geysermage, 3 mana for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked for an additional 3, you can bounce 1 other target creature to its owner's hand. This is costly, but again, it'll depend on how good the removal is in the set. In the past, we've had cards at 3 mana that just enter the battlefield. In some of the M sets, for example, there was a wizard that was 1 blue. When it enters the battlefield, return a creature to its owner's hand. So this guy, definitely expensive from a historic perspective. Pretty rad art. I mean, he's riding some type of lizard. Skitch, apparently. Skitch is the lizard's name, as we all know now, thanks to the flavor text. And yeah, I mean, again, this is not going to be an embarrassing card to sleeve up. On curve, you'll play it. You're not necessarily always going to need to get the value out of it, but if you're top decking this from an empty hand perspective, getting as much value as possible out of your cards is going to be welcome and limited. Iridescent Hornbeetle, 5 casting cost, 3/4. At the beginning of the end step, you get a 1/1 green insect for each +1/+1 counter you've put on a creature under your control this turn. So this is doing double duty with your +1/+1 counters. Could have some fun constructed implications. I imagine this will be a commander card, going to be played alongside things like Yorvo and all of the different creatures that basically like Hydras, where you're coming in and they're just entering with a bunch of +1/+1 counters. So this could be a lot of fun for commander, and depending on your limited pool, this could be a fun card at your pre-release as well. Can create quite an advantage, and very easy to engineer a deck that can take advantage of this with cards like Orin Reef and things that just put +1/+1 counters on all of your guys. And then of course later on, when you put more +1/+1 counters on all your guys, now you have a bunch of 1/1 insects to kind of let things spiral wildly and exponentially out of control. Kargan Intimidator, a 2 mana 3/1. I like that. Cowards can't block warriors. Love that element of flavor being back in the game. Actually had somebody in the shop recently, in a live game of Commander, they found out that wasn't just a rule in Magic. Somebody tried to block their warrior with a changeling, and they're like, cowards can't block warriors. And they had to be explained that, nope, that is a static ability on some cards. That's not just rules text that is associated with it, which is an understandable mistake because that's the way the game used to work. Walls used to not be able to block. Walls used to not be able to attack. This is before the defender keyword. If you somehow turned your opponent's creature into a wall, it couldn't attack you. And I miss that. I actually think that was a really cool part of Magic, but that doesn't exist anymore. And because of that, we also now have changelings. And, it's probably better. I mean, it would be a lot more complicated to have changelings if walls had their own rules text. That's also why they changed the creature type from a creature being a legend to legend being a super type. Because again, you could turn your opponent's creatures into legends to disastrous effect. Anyways, a little bit of a flashback there, but Kargan Intimidator, paying 1, you get to choose one that hasn't been done this turn. You can give them +1/+1, make something a coward, or give them trample. So kind of have a 4/2 here most of the time. You can give them trample, no problem. And if your opponent does have a blocker, a single blocker can be brushed aside effortlessly. And that also is going to give all of your warriors that kind of unblockability from cowards. So a lot of benefit can be reaped from this in a warrior heavy deck. It's just a rare that you're going to be happy to have if it's on color. Seagate Restoration, 7 mana, triple blue. That is a lot to ask. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand +1. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. And it is a mythic, so it can come into play and tap for blue right away if you're willing to lose the 3 life. I'm not going to lie, this card feels probably pretty bad. 7 mana to draw a card is hot garbage, and just having the no maximum hand size till end of game, not a huge deal. Casual players will like it. They're probably just going to focus on the upside of this, which is where you have like 7 cards in hand, and then you draw this for turn, and then you play it, and you draw 8 cards, and now you have 15, and then you play another one, and you just keep doubling. Sure, I'll give you that. That might be fun for you, but very difficult to pull off against a live opponent. A little bit like Bruce Lee talking about hitting a heavy bag. It's like you look real good hitting a heavy bag, but when you get in a fight, it's a mess because you don't actually have experience fighting. I feel like this is the type of card that goldfishes really, really well, and then as soon as you have any resistance at all, this is just a train wreck. It costs a ton of mana, doesn't work out all the time, it's sorcery speed. There's a lot of negative elements about this card, and overall it feels like a trap. I hope that if you do play it, it works out for you and you have fun, but there's going to be a lot of games where this one just doesn't work out for the people who are trying to make it happen. All right, let's see here. We've got a 3/3 for 3. We already do this guy? You can kick him for 2, and when you kick him... Oh, this is the one you can return a card with kicker from your graveyard to your hand. So that's kind of cool. A 3/3 for 3 is totally fine, and then for 5 mana, you can get another card back with kicker. These guys in tandem, actually pretty cool. Morog, Fury of Akum. Not 100% on the pronunciation of anything I just said there. Legendary Minotaur Warrior for 6. He is a 6/6. Each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time it has attacked this turn. So when you declare attackers, that is going to trigger... Actually, it's just a static ability. It's not even like a trigger that happens on attack. So once you have attacked, all of those creatures are going to get a bonus, which is very attractive. And he doesn't have to attack to make that happen. So you can just play him on turn 6 and potentially just get that +1/+0 across the board. And then on top of it, we've got a landfall ability, which is going to, if it's your main phase... Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. At the beginning of that combat, untap all creatures you control. So this guy, going to be very solid and limited. Being able to take extra attack steps is just devastating. But I really expect this guy to be an MVP at commander tables, where you're going to be using landfall to just get all sorts of extra attack steps. I am certain there's got to be a bunch of infinite combos here using, let's see here. Even just something that returns a land to your hand and then having a creature that taps to put a land into the battlefield is going to give you infinite attacks. So you're talking like trade routes and anything that lets you put a land from your hand into the battlefield, and you've already got it. I think trade routes is going to go through the roof. That's just my guess. I haven't taken a look. You know what? I'm going to check real quick. Yeah, it's only a few bucks on TCG. Major vendors seem to be sold out. And I will not be surprised if that's a $5 card very quickly. They're available for like $1 from a couple of vendors on TCG Player. If anyone takes the opportunity to buy out trade routes and it works out for them, just let us know. Lithoform Blight. A 2 casting cost card that fixes mana for black. I don't know if this is supposed to feel like a drawback, but when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and the enchanted land becomes a mana confluence, tapping to add 1 mana of any color for a point of life. I don't know. This card is not at all embarrassing to sleeve up, and the fact that you're drawing a card while fixing your mana, I don't know. This card could definitely have some type of constructed implication. Anything that says draw a card on it, you have to assess very carefully. And yeah, this card seems not embarrassing for limited. It's going to do some mana fixing. If you're in a heavy black deck and you've got a splash in there, this can help out. Yeah, it seems fine. Phylath World Sculptor. An elemental 5/5 for 6. When it enters the battlefield, you get a 0/1 green plant token for each basic land you control. So this is going to for basically Avenger of Zendikar-esque, create a bunch of green plants in your pre-release pool. This is, I guess you're going to have some non-basics because of all of these lands that are on the opposite sides of spells and creatures. So those will be a little bit of a drawback for this guy, but the advantage is going to be pretty massive. The landfall is whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put 4 +1/+1 counters on a plant you control. So he is an elemental, so he's not getting the bonus, but those 0/1 tokens are going to start getting bumped up to 4/5s, and not on the level of Avenger of Zendikar at all. That guy is just one of the better, just like an insurmountably incredibly good card for Commander and for Limited. But this guy does cost 1 less mana, which is not to be discounted, and you'll get that extra turn of him being around and the extra landfall on the following turn. Lull Mage Familiar, 3 casting cost, 2/4 that taps for a blue or a green, and whenever you kick a spell, you gain 2 life. This card seems fine all around. I wouldn't be shocked if it saw some constructed play. If kickers end up having a few really solid options, just getting extra value, ramping you, being a blocker, and being able to use that mana during the end step to do some very blue effects like card drawing or, countering some stuff. Cinderclasm, 2 casting costs, deals 1 damage to each creature, or you want to kick it, let's do 2 damage to each creature, and it's an instant. So this card, very, very interesting. Again, feels like it could have constructed implications, and just a real important part of Limited is kind of the idea of having cards that you can overcommit into and then just get completely blown out by. So I like this card a lot. You're going to often just wipe out all your opponent's creatures with this. There are times at instant speed, this card is just going to be incredibly good. A instant speed Pyroclasm, I just think, is going to be one of the stronger cards in the set for pre-release and for draft. And I think we're back to the beginning. Yes. All right. So there we go. Not too bad. A little over a half hour. Let me know how you guys like these videos, if you want them to be shorter or longer. This is everything that's been spoiled up until this morning when I started taking all the images off the internet. And I think the set looks awesome. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and we will see you again soon. That is all for this one, but don't worry, there is a lot more. You can check out our older videos, and we're always putting out new videos from ELD's Time Vault Games in Bellingham, Massachusetts. If you want to help the channel, of course, you can like, subscribe, share, tap that notification bell so you can know the next time our new videos come out. Thanks for watching.